to identify it.
Sorry.
That's okay. I'm going to be talking about how to identify it or how to diagnose parental alienation. And we're going to pause at certain points to see if there are questions. So if there are things you want to ask about, we're suggesting that you write them down in the chat here in Zoom, in the chat function. And at certain points, we'll pause to see if there's any questions about what we've said so far. Thanks particularly to Carol for organizing this event. I appreciate that. So whenever I give these talks about parental alienation, I have to make sure we have definitions and that everybody is talking about the same thing. So this is the definition that we use, which is a child. And then the thing that's important here, usually one whose parents are engaged in a high conflict separation or divorce. So that's usually the case. But the child connects or allies strongly with one parent and rejects a relationship with the other parent. And of course, this is without a good reason, without legitimate justification. So a lot of people who work with families like these family diagrams. So this is one way to think about parental alienation, in that there's two parents, the favored parent and the alienated parent, and they blame each other. In other words, the child is having a problem. And in particular, the child doesn't want to go see, doesn't want to go have parenting time with the rejected parent, and the parents blame each other. So this squiggle here, this yellow squiggle, is what we call parental alienation. In other words, it's the attitude of the child refusing to see the alienated parent. And this big red line here is what we call alienating behaviors. In other words, one parent engages in alienating behaviors, and that causes parental alienation in the child. And I'm going through all this because some people have different definitions and they use these words in a somewhat different way. But this is the way we distinguish alienating behaviors and by the parent, and parental alienation is a condition, it's a mental condition of the child. So the main thing, what we're going to be talking about this evening is how do you diagnose this? So this is some information that's been developed only in the last 2 or 3 years, because my colleagues and I thought that we need a consistent way to diagnose or to identify parental alienation so that basically we're all on the same page. So these are the 5 things that we think you need to have. First of all, the child says, I don't want to go see the other parent. In other words, that's a threshold issue. The child manifests contact refusal. Another one is that previously the child had a good relationship with that parent. So in the past, before all the problems happened, the child and that parent had good times together. The third of these 5 factors is the absence of abuse, neglect, or highly deficient parenting. In other words, the child's rejection is not justified by anything that parent has done. The fourth factor are alienating behaviors. In other words, I just showed you a diagram in which the alienating parent engages in these alienating behaviors. And so that's, I'm going to explain in more detail what that is. And the last one are the manifestations in the child. And I just showed you the diagram. That yellow squiggle are the behaviors of the child. You know, hey, let me mention about the Zoom. Bosse, turn your microphone off. You know how to do that?
Okay, so thank you.
It'll do, because it's just causing some noises. There you go. Thank you very much. We're cool. Okay, so this is an outline of what we're going to be talking about today. Now, all of this has been written up in an article that you don't have to read the small print here, but the reference to this article is at the bottom, which was only published about a year ago in a journal in Ireland called The 5-Factor Model for the Diagnosis of Parental Alienation. And I sent this article to Carol, and I think that she has distributed, or she will distribute it to people who are on this Zoom call. So you don't have to take a lot of notes, just kind of listen, pay attention. But you can get this article that has the same information. So this is also in the book that my colleague and I published about a year ago. In other words, this book called Parental Alienation, Science and Law is organized, the book is organized around the 5-factor model. So we've published information on this that other people have been able to see. So let's go through the 5 things. I already told you the first one is the child says, I don't want to go see the other parent. And that's fairly easy to establish. That's what's known, that frequently that's the reason why the child comes to the attention to the psychologist or the court or the attorney, that the child doesn't want to go see the other parent. And so that's usually rather obvious that that's happening. And the child himself will say that I don't want to go see the other parent. And might say it to several different people. So let me just see, Carol, let's just take a quick look at the chat to see if there's a question here. People are just kind of saying hello. Does anybody have any question right now about what we said so far? In other words, a general overview and factor 1.
Okay, let me
That's
just
okay.
let me just take you through what daktari, allow me to call daktari in Swahili, Dr. Burnett. What I is trying to say is like when a child says they don't want to see a parent, I need to relate back to the case of the Kamothos, for those who watch the Kamothos case, whereby the children literally bet and abused their mother and chased her away and saying they don't want to see her, and called her a witch and called her very nasty names. So that is what Dr. Burnett is trying to tell you about the behavior of a child towards a targeted parent.
Okay. So here's an important thing, is that parental alienation can be mild, moderate, and severe. And it's based on factor 1. In other words, whether it's mild or moderate or severe is based on how severely, how vigorously does the child refuse to see the other parent. And mild is pretty easy. The child says, I don't want to go see mommy or daddy. I don't want to go see that person. But the child goes, and once they're there, they're fine. In other words, they put up some verbal complaints, but once they go, they're fine with the rejected parent. Moderate is the child says, I don't want to go see mommy or daddy. And the child goes, but is difficult, is oppositional. And so part of the visit is okay. Part of the visit, the child is very difficult, is negativistic. Severe is the child says, I don't want to go see mommy or daddy, and doesn't go, and hasn't gone for months or maybe even years. So that's severe. Severe can also be when the child does go, but is negative during the entire time. In other words, during the entire weekend or afternoon or whatever with the other parent, the child is persistently oppositional. And, you know, the child might stay in her room the entire time, won't have any meals or eat with the parent, stays on her cell phone, back with the favorite parent, and so on. So that's this refusing to see the parent is basically how you decide how bad it is, whether it's mild, moderate, or severe. So this is factor 2, that in the past, the rejected parent had a good time, had a good relationship with the child. And how do you know that? Well, sometimes there are photographs, family members can say that. There are videos, sometimes there are letters that the child has written in the past, or cards saying, I love you, mommy, I love you, daddy, you're the best daddy in the world. So in the past, the child had a good relationship with this parent. And it wasn't perfect. You know, we don't expect everybody to be perfect, but there was basically a good relationship. So that's number 2. Number 3 is important because you have to be able to show or determine that the rejected parent has not been abusive or really a really poor parent. Because if the rejected parent was just a kind of a horrible parent, well, then that explains why the child doesn't want to go see the other parent. In other words, it's not because of indoctrination or anything. It's because the the parent kind of deserves it. And in parental alienation, that's not the case. In alienation, the child's rejection is way, way out of proportion to anything that parent has done. Is there anything, before we go on, let's just see if there's anything that anybody wants to bring up about factor 2 or factor 3. It looks like everybody's okay here. Carol, did you want to add anything here while talking about factor 2 and factor 3?
I'll take you back to the severe alienation. I want to stress so much on that because this is what we saw. And again, I'm going to attach another case of Wambua. Remember the case of Wambua where the daughter accused the dad of raping her, and the dad spent 10 years in jail. He was supposed to serve life, but the daughter came out and told everybody that the dad actually did not rape her. It was the mother who coached her to say so. So when you're talking about severe alienation, that is exactly what Dr. Burnett is trying to tell you. If anybody has a question, please. Is there anybody who might have a question up to that point as we move forward?
I think we can go on,
Okay.
But factor 4 is really important. Factor 4 is what causes the alienation in the child. In other words, if the favored parent engages in alienating behaviors, and there's a whole series of these, there are actually 17 of these. So I don't think we're going to discuss every one of them, but we can point out the ones that are most common. For instance, it says, the first one here says denigrating and criticizing the other parent. So the alienating parent incessantly makes bad remarks, bad mouthing, what we might call bad mouthing the rejected parent to the child, and also to other people, others, people in the neighborhood, people at the school, people at church, that the alienating parent broadcasts her criticisms of the rejected parent. And then she also, I'm saying she just right now because suppose it's the mother who's the alienating parent, but sometimes it's the father. But the mother might limit contact with the other parent. For instance, it's time, maybe there's a schedule and it's time for the dad to have parenting time, but the mother says the child doesn't want to go today. Interfering with communication is when the child is with the other. When the father tries to communicate, for instance, tries to make a phone call or tries to send a letter, that the alienating parent will interfere with that. So here are a few more alienating behaviors. A big one is where it says here, allowing the child to choose between his or her parents. This is a really, really common tactic used by the alienating parent. Is she says, oh, the child is 10 years old. He can decide. It's up to him to decide. And he can go see his dad if he wants to, or if he doesn't want to, he doesn't have to. So that's incorrect. In other words, in most countries, the judge decides in cases like this, like disputed cases, the judge would decide what the schedule is supposed to be. And it's not up to the child or up to the mother to make that schedule. And the mother can't leave it up to the child, but the mother has to say, it's your time to go see your dad, so go. Another one that's really common is creating the impression that the other parent is dangerous. In other words, you kind of brainwash the child that the other parent has done dangerous things. And I think Carol just mentioned a case in your country in which I gather that the mother coached the child to say that the father had abused her in some way. So these are common alienating factors. It says here, asking the child to spy on the other parent. Well, when they're at the home, to look to see who's there, look at papers, bring copies back to the alienating parent. The next one says asking the child to keep secrets. Another one that's common here is withholding medical, social, and academic information. In other words, if the children mainly live with the mother, that the mother doesn't tell the dad anything about how the child is doing in school, whether the child is having medical problems, or allow the dad to participate in school activities. So these are all common. I guess there are 17 of these. Oh, here are a couple more, which makes 17. So these are all what we would call alienating behaviors. And where does this list come from? In other words, I didn't make up this list, but in all 5 of these factors, there's been research. And in particular, on factor 4, there's been research on what is it, what are the things that an alienating parent might do. And there's a psychologist in New York City named Amy Baker who has collected statistics from children who were alienated, and now they're adults. She went back and asked them, well, what did the other parent do that caused you to be alienated? And she also collected statistics from parents who are currently alienated from their children. In other words, what's the other parent doing? So she came up with this list of 17 common alienating behaviors. Let me go on to factor 5, which are the, oh yeah, I forgot, I need to say this. So I already told you that the severity of alienation is based on the behavior of the child, mild, moderate, severe, depending on how much the child avoids seeing the rejected parent. So that's the severity of parental alienation. Here, I'm talking about the severity of alienating behaviors. So this has to do with the behaviors of the parent, and it can also be mild, moderate, and severe. And mild is that the parent might just do something transiently or accidentally, says something that might undermine the child's relationship with the other parent, but he or she doesn't do it persistently. And if they're given guidance by a psychologist or a counselor, then they stop doing it because they realize that it's not appropriate to do that. I guess a simple example is the mother might say, oh, honey, you're going to go see your daddy today, but you know that mommy really loves you more than daddy loves you, or something like that. That's not a good thing to say. But if it's only done a few times and the parent stops it when told to stop it, then that's mild. Moderate is the parent is doing this on purpose, and the parent is trying to undermine the child's relationship with the other parent. And it goes on constantly every week. But even these parents might be reachable in counseling. And if you talk to the parent and you explain that what they're doing is harmful, then they won't do it so much. Severe alienating behaviors is extremely difficult to change because the parent is obsessed with destroying the child's relationship with the other parent. And they engage in all sorts of these behaviors, and they do it incessantly. And sometimes it almost seems like a delusion. In other words, it almost seems like the mother has a delusion that the dad is a bad person. And so she conveys this delusion to the child. In other words, that's why it doesn't respond to typical outpatient counseling. So that was factor 4, which has to do with the activities of the parent. And now we want to talk about factor 5, which are the activities of the child. And there are only 8 of these, and these have been written about for a long time, ever since parental alienation was originally described in the 1980s. And this is what they are. For instance, the first thing the child does is the campaign of denigration. Let's see, what should we do here? Bosse has his hand raised. So Carol, should we let Bosse ask his question?
Bosse can ask this question after CM. CM ask a question on the chat, whereby he's asking, does alienation only occur where parents are separated, divorced, co-parenting? Can it happen in a family setup where both parents live together?
Okay, well, of course, that's a great question.
Yeah.
And yes, the answer is yes. Sometimes it happens when the parents are still together, and especially in more severe cases. And it happens in sometimes from birth. In other words, the child comes home from the mom comes home from the hospital or has a baby and takes care of the baby. And the mom won't let the dad do anything. The mom won't even let the dad hold the baby or feed the baby or do anything. And so the mom, from the very, very beginning, when they're still living all in the same household. So yes, sometimes it happens even in the same household. And then if the parents separate or divorce, it gets worse typically. But yes, it can happen even when they're all in the same household.
Okay, Bossa, you had a question? Bossa, did you have a question?
Okay, I think we're okay.
Okay.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to ask the question about, there was those factors when you're reading them, it was, if you go back on your screen one page, please, Dr. Ray. No, the next one. The next one. Yeah, communicating disapproval when child shows affection for other parent. If you elaborate a little bit more on that.
Sure. Thank you for the question. So suppose the mother is the alienating parent and the child goes to visit with the dad for the weekend or so and comes home and the child says, oh, we had a good time this weekend, you know, we went to a movie or we saw something on television. We went to visit my grandmother, the dad's mother. We went to visit the other grandmother and we had a good time. And the mother doesn't want to hear that. She doesn't want to hear the child saying that they had a good time with the other parent. And she'll find some way to interrupt it or say, oh, gee, you know, that's the grandmother, you know, you know, you remember that grandmother. She's the one who didn't give you any birthday present the last time you had a birthday. Or you remember that grandmother. She was mean to you when we went to visit her or something like that. In other words, the mother will attempt to negate or cancel the child's description of having a good time with the dad and the dad's family. So that I'm sure there's a lot of different ways you can do that, but that's one way you can do it.
Okay, let me just elaborate a little bit. I'm still going to use these two examples, the Wambua story and the Kamoto story. And I would advise you guys to go back and watch the videos. Where in Kamoto story, you had the father telling the children, those who went and looked for their mother and decided they want to be their mother, they were excommunicated. They were disowned by their father because they decided to go and meet their mom and bond with them. That is another way of communication disapproval. And when you come to the Wambua story, you will hear the daughter saying that the moment the girl decided that she wants to go and meet the dad in prison, she was also excommunicated by the mother because of that. So those are the examples of communication disapproval. Like if one child decides, I don't want this, I don't like what you're doing to me, I don't like you disapproving my communication with my mom or my dad, and they decide to go to the targeted parent. When they come home to the alienating parent, they are somehow not given the love that they deserve. They are discriminated inside their home, and they're not given affection that they're supposed to have.
Thank you, Carol. So the examples that Carol gave were much, much more dramatic and severe. I mean, the little example that I gave you sort of an everyday common example, but the Carol has much more dramatic examples of disapproval. So that's a helpful comparison. So I think we can go ahead to the next idea here, which is factor 5. As I said, factor 4 are things that the parent has done. Factor 5 are things manifested by the child. They're signs. A sign is something that you can observe in the child. And the first one is campaign of denigration of the rejected parent. So that's where the child has all these complaints. He complains to the dad, he complains about the dad, to the mom, he complains to the therapist, he complains to the judge, it's a list. And there's this one thing after another. But what's interesting about it, many of the things are very trivial. And that's the second thing here. There are weak or frivolous reasons for the rejection. So the child might say, oh, I don't want to go see dad because when I'm with him, he's on the computer too much. Or the last time I went with him, I didn't like what we had for dinner, that we had something for dinner and I told him I didn't like that. So I don't want to go see him anymore. Or there are other kinds of frivolous things that the child might say. The next one is interesting. It's lack of ambivalence. That means, that's also called splitting sometimes. So that means that the child says one parent is totally, totally good and the other parent is totally, totally bad. And that's not normal. Children usually say, oh, there are some good points about mom, there's some bad points about mom, or dad, there's some good points and bad points. So it's abnormal for a child to say that a parent is totally good or the parent is totally bad. But that's very dramatic. I had a child who said, my mother is my angel, my dad is a devil. So that's another example of splitting. Some of these only come up, they don't come up in everyday life. They come up in an evaluation conference or meeting with a psychologist. For instance, the next one is called the independent thinker phenomena. And in that case, what it means is the child comes into the appointment and says to the doctor, you know, people think that mom is telling me to say these things, but it's not true. These are all my own ideas. In other words, the child spontaneously asserts that nobody is indoctrinating or coaching her. So there are 8 of these. Let me tell you the other 4. Reflexive support of one parent against the other. So you might be having a family meeting and some issue comes up and the child always sides with one parent and always says, oh, I agree with mother on this, or the opposite, I agree with dad. So the child never considers maybe one parent is good at one time or right, or the other parent the other time, but the child always is on the same side. Another example is absence of guilt. I mean, these children do really, really rude things and very harmful and mean things to a parent. And they show no guilt or no remorse for that. Here, I'll give you a quick example of that. I was seeing a boy and he was talking about how he doesn't care if his dad dies or doesn't die. And I said, well, what about that? I mean, that seems pretty extreme. And he says, yeah, if dad dies, we get his insurance, his life insurance, and we'll have plenty of money. So that's absence of guilt. I guess that's an example of that. Borrowed scenarios is a common one. That's where the mother or the alienating parent comes in to the doctor, the psychologist, and says certain things, 1, 2, 3 about the other parent. And then later the child comes in and says the same things, 1, 2, 3. And some of these complaints about the other parent are things that the child never witnessed. Some of them are things that happened before the child was even born. In other words, the child is quoting almost the complaints made by the alienating parent. And the last one of these is animosity for the extended family. So what that means is the child doesn't want to go see dad, but the child also complains about the grandparents of the dad, the aunts, the uncles. Sometimes they even complain about the pets. You know, I don't want to go see dad, and dad has a dog, and I hate that dog. I never want to see him again either. So these are the 8 common behavioral symptoms of parental alienation. And in really severe cases, you would find all of these. But in other cases, you don't have to find all of them. You can find maybe 4 or 5 or 6 of them. So here's another thing to think about. There's a kind of a sequence of events in the child. So first of all, the child makes false statements like, I don't want to go see dad because the last time I was there, he didn't say a single word and he didn't even cook dinner for me. So that's a false statement. So if a child makes false statements over and over again, they start to have false beliefs. They start to believe that these things actually happen. And then if it continues, they start to have false memories. That's a dramatic thing. The child comes in and recites a memory about something that never happened. These are called events that never happened. But they can be very convincing. But that's part of why this is a very difficult condition, because sometimes these children essentially have false memories or even delusions about things that the parent has done. So let me see. I think that here, I think there's one more thing here. This is kind of important to understand, that we use the word alienation to mean something different from estrangement. When we say alienation, we mean that the child rejects a parent without a good reason. For instance, it's usually because of indoctrination by the other parent. When we say estrangement, the child rejects a parent and it's for a good reason. And, and I mentioned earlier that if there's a history of abuse or neglect, well, that's not parental alienation. So these words, I'll tell you, if you look in the dictionary, it says these words mean the same thing. But in this field of study of parental alienation, these words have been adopted to mean 2 different things. And that in the literature and the articles, that almost everybody now means alienation is without a good reason and estrangement is with a good reason. So let's see if there are any other comments or questions that we should talk about before we go on.
Yes, there's CM. CM, do you want to ask the question or should I just read it? CM is asking, should the 8 behavioral symptoms be included while making a psychological report in case of child custody legal proceedings? And then we had Saida also had a question. I saw her hands up.
Oh, thank you. Someone answered. Thank you.
Do you want to ask? Maybe if you say it, going to come out more clearer.
I think that's just what I wanted to find out, because sometimes you're asked to come up with a psychological report that goes maybe to the lawyer that's representing the children. And I was thinking, wow, this is like something that's so beautiful. There's an assessment, there are symptoms to look out for. So can this be included in the psychological report?
Yes. Yes,
okay.
I think it should. In other words, if you're, I'm not sure exactly in Kenya what the judge wants. In some places, the judge wants an opinion and a recommendation, and in other places, the judge just wants information. So I think in either case, you can say that you have collected information about this family, and that in the child, you have noticed that there are 7 or 8 of these signs that typically occur in children who have parental alienation. And yes, I think you should list it. You should probably list the article In other words, don't make it sound like you made this up yourself, but you should list the article that I think Carol is distributing. But you should also, incidentally, you have to list the alienating behaviors also, because to really have parental alienation, you have to have both. In other words, you have to have somebody engaging in behaviors that are causing the alienation, and then you have to have the behaviors in the child. So you have to have both. You can't just because see, some people by mistake say that oh, the child doesn't want to go see daddy, he must have parental alienation. Well, just because the child doesn't want to go see daddy is not enough to make this diagnosis. You have to be able to show where it's coming from. You have to be able to show that mom has indoctrinated or influenced the child in some way. I think everybody understands that, although there are a few people who say that, see, because if the child doesn't want to go see daddy, it could be a lot of different reasons. It could be daddy is a horrible person, or it could be daddy lives so far away, it's just impossible to go see him. Or it could be daddy has a new wife who I hate. In other words, it could be different reasons other than just alienation. So thank you for asking that. So here's an interesting question.
There's one, Saida. Saida, can you ask a question, please?
Before I ask the question, I just want to answer my fellow sister who just asked about the question. I have been in court for several times, and about these kids, behavior of the kids, you know. First of all, I will advise my fellow woman to have evidence, which I mean, like, for example, if she sees that behavior is abnormal or she's not understanding the child, she should be having something like a voice record or something without the child knowing, because sometimes also they can say that you did it intentionally. You know what I mean? Eh? So court in Kenya, what they do, if the child is above 7 or 6 years, they remove everybody outside so that they can ask the child separately without the both parents. So kids like this, I know, and my children are among those children, they are victims, and because their father is a narcissistic, it's so challenging to have something like this allegation to take it to the court. It is very hard. You need to have a good evidence. And another question, my question is now, I want to ask about, it can be the child is not happy. Maybe the child is telling you, I don't want to be there. I don't want to go to my dad, but the child is not giving you the reason why. But when he sees the child, the father, or maybe the father is coming to pick the child, because the father can provide everything, can give the children everything they need. So when they are with you, they are just telling you what is happening. They have that fear. You are, as a mother, you can see that fear. But when the father comes to pick the kids, they can't say no. They are happy. They are saying like, daddy is going to buy something for us. Daddy takes us there and there. I think that, does it mean that these kids, they don't know exactly where to stand? They say this at the same time when they go that they are on the other parent, they are talking another thing. I don't understand. I want to know about that, because it's really challenging when it comes to the court issue with these types of kids.
Well, I think I understand, but there are lots of reasons why children have opinions about how they want to spend their time and whether they want to see mom or want to see dad. And what we're talking about here is really serious, where one parent indoctrinates the children to be afraid of the other parent. But there are other things that happen. For instance, a loyalty conflict is somewhat different. In a loyalty conflict, the mother tries to get the affection of the child, and the dad tries to get the affection of the child. And so the child is caught in the middle. And in a loyalty conflict, the child tries hard to be friends with mom and be friends with dad, but that's very hard to do for children when there's arguing between the parents. So in loyalty conflict, the child tries to stay on good terms with both, but in alienation, they solve that problem by simply going to one side and avoiding the other side. So I guess my point is, in the little description you gave, there are lots of reasons why children want to go visit or don't want to go visit. Obviously, what we want is for children to have two parents, and we want children to have a good relationship with both parents. And so sometimes it's hard to achieve that.
Can I just add on top of that? Saida, what you're talking about could be in the part of mild or moderate alienation, whereby it is still not seen, it is still not so active. So the child does not know what to do. Their child has not been fully brainwashed. So they don't understand why mom is saying this about dad and why dad is saying this about mom. But when it comes to severe alienation, that is when the child will be like, no, I'm not going, I'm not doing this. It's like they know what they really want. And from some a phrase that somebody haters wrote, and I read, sometimes when mom would smile and wave at me, I wouldn't wave back. I didn't know what my dad would say if he caught me, but I knew it wouldn't be good. Sometimes it's because of the time that they were given.
Yeah, children get caught in the middle, and it's very painful for them. It's very difficult. Let me tell you about this. I want to make sure you know about this conference that's coming up. Actually, I guess it's in a week or so. Here, let me see. Oh, there we go. So, you know, I'm the president of this organization called Parental Alienation Study Group, and we put on these conferences, and there's one coming up in September in Belgium. And most people, and it's 2 days, there's many interesting presentations. Most people are not able to travel. And so it's online, it will be online, and you can watch it online, and it's translated into four different languages. I mean, it's sort of like the United Nations, the way they do these conferences. So let me just tell you something about it. Well, first of all, you can get information about it at my website. At the organization is Parental Alienation Study Group. And so if you want more information, you can go to this www.pasg.info. And so there's a link on the website for the study group. There's a link to this one, to the information about the conference. So just let me give you one hint about this conference. It is a little bit expensive to sign up for, but you need to sign up if you want to see it next week. But after the conference is over, maybe 2 months later, we post most of the conference on YouTube. So you don't actually have to pay anything. To see the conference, you don't have to sign up to go to it next week. You can wait 2 or 3 months, and most of the presentations will be posted on YouTube. My organization, PASG, has a YouTube channel, and you can find it. If you go to YouTube, you can find the presentations from the first and the second and the third conferences. And so this is the fourth one. I think you search for the PASG channel, I think is the way you find it. And so, in other words, my hint is you don't have to pay to attend this next week or 2 weeks, whenever it is. You can wait and see it on YouTube for free in 2 or 3 months. So anyway, I hope you take advantage of that. And also, if you want to join the organization, which is free, there's no dues or anything, just come to the website, and it says contact us, and you can send in information. Just contact us and say you want to join the.
Okay.
So let's see if you have any more questions about the 5 factors, or if you have questions about the organization.
Let me just read one from Basagara. He's asking, or she, does alienation refer to only biological parents?
Oh, yeah, I saw that on that.
Mhm.
No, it can happen in lots of different circumstances. It mainly happens in biological parents when they get divorced and they argue over the children. But there can be other ways. For instance, it can be between the grandmother and the father. For instance, suppose the mother's mother gets all involved and the maternal grandmother can be the person who's engaging in the alienating behaviors against the father. And so that's another way. Or still another way is a therapist. Sometimes therapists get very involved with these families, and the therapist gets on the side. The therapist picks a side and says that this parent, that parent A, is the good parent, and parent B is the bad parent. And the therapist will indoctrinate the child to have that same feeling. So these are less common, but they do happen. And obviously there are other circumstances. I mean, it's you can have an adoptive parent, suppose father loses his wife and he's raising the children, and then he gets remarried. And so there are stepchildren, and they might even be adopted. And so there can be a dispute between the biological father and the adoptive mother as to the children, and alienation can occur in that situation. So all these are less common, but you can imagine that they can happen in many different ways.
Yeah, just to wrap up on that question, in Africa, our situation is quite different because we are surrounded and brought up with a lot of cultures from different backgrounds. Also, I want to refer you guys to the story of, it's on YouTube. It's called My Father-in-Law Will Not Let Me Bury My Wife. Please go to YouTube and watch it, whereby this man lost his wife, and so the in-laws took the children because he had not paid the dowry. And you know how dowry is a very important thing in African culture. So go and watch it. And also, you can also find it on Concealed Abuse YouTube channel. That's my channel, Concealed Abuse, where I've put a lot of examples of parental alienation happening in different forms. All right, good. As we continue, Dr. Ari. Hello, Dr. William.
Yes.
Let's continue.
Oh no, I think we've covered the questions. And oh yeah, this is as far as I wanted to go in my presentation. So I've covered everything that I wanted to cover today. Thank you. Okay, so team also I'd mentioned Dr. earlier, and team who are on Concealed Abuse YouTube, WhatsApp. I told that I was going to take the petition to Parliament and to the judiciary, whereby it says, I don't know whether you can see it clearly. Yeah, it says criminalize parental alienation by fining the alienating parents, because the court cannot arrest them. The court cannot arrest the alienating parent, but they can at least fine them so that they can know that it is wrong. I've given all the details from what Dr. has just given us, and some other information from Amy Baker and from Jennifer Hammond and the team that you are working with concerning parental alienation, that can help the court understand what this is, how they can identify it, and how they can know it is real. And I want to pose a question to the counselors. Has anyone of you ever come across this kind of cases and might not know what they meant, or even if they had a name? Is there anybody, any counselor who has come through these cases whereby it is either the targeted parent who is being denied the child, or a child who is alienating a parent, or an adult child who have mother-daddy issue and did not know what happened in between? Please share with us your experience as we move forward. Or any other comment or addition?
Is there anybody who is going through parental alienation, has not seen their children, do not know what to do, do not understand how to go about it? If you are ever frustrated by a counselor, as a psychiatrist, a psychologist, or in court, please share with us. Okay. I have Masagara, karibu. Masagara, please, the floor is yours. Okay, I think it was supposed to be private. Thank you for the insight information about parental alienation from TechnoSparks. Thank you very much.
So I think we've covered a lot of material, but I know there's much more to know about this topic. But I want to thank everybody. I want to thank Carol for arranging this and for all of you participating. And it sounds like Carol has some interesting and important missions ahead with regard to the government. And I wish her the best. I hope that works out.
Yeah.
So I think I'm going to be signing off. And I'll be saying goodbye, but I hope things work out for you all. I think what I have to do here, first I have to stop share. There we go.
Yeah. Good.
Now we can see everybody.
You can see everybody right now.
Yeah, that's much better. So it's nice to see y'all. And I wish you the best.
Okay. Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you, everyone, for showing up. I really appreciate it. I'm putting my number down here so that anybody want to contact me can do so. 724-924199. My number is 0724924199. For more information, for more materials, just text me and I will give them out. Thank you. Good night.
Kindly repeat your number.
That is Caroline's number, 0724924199.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for attending.
Okay, thank you.
I want to believe that the meeting has come to an end, and thank you so much for attending. Our next meeting in this particular concern will be on the 28th of next month. Again, you're all welcome.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Karibu.
Asante. All well.
Okay, I'll share the recording. Don't worry. I'll share the recording to different groups. I will share the recording to different groups. I'm going to find them there either today or tomorrow.
Ibu si ukaleta gari ya tadi. Imanu. Siku tu kata-kata nyanya.
Eti mama, ima tusisumbuane juu naona unaelekea hapo. Na si hiyo tu kuchota.